It's Tuesday, the 2nd of November 2021. Welcome to Fear and Greed, the business podcast that sets you up for a successful day. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Westpac's share price tumbles after a very disappointing profit result. That's our main story. Also this morning, the heat in the housing market starts to cool, a big day for economists with the Reserve Bank meeting, and a foolproof way of picking a winner in today's Melbourne Cup. Then stay listening for Sean's chat to Ron Gauci, Chief Executive of the Australian Information Industry Association, about the role of technology across the economy. But first, Sean, Westpac's share price fell by more than 7% yesterday after the bank unveiled a disappointing full-year result.
Yes, it sure did. And in doing so, it's now the third largest bank in the country behind Commonwealth Bank and National Australia Bank. Until yesterday's announcement, it was number 2. It also means it's now the 5th largest company, not the 4th largest company. Yesterday's results for the year to the end of September was all about costs and a poor performance from its institutional bank. The bank's net interest margin, which is the difference between what it pays on deposits and receives on loans, was squeezed. Now, a big part of the cost problem was that the bank had to employ more than 3,000 new staff during the year to help improve its compliance and risk management practices. Remember, Michael, back in 2019, the then CEO, Brian Hartzer, resigned over money laundering that was uncovered at the bank. The bank now has more than 40,000 employees, and that is a big wages bill. Westpac reported cash earnings for the year of $5.35 billion, which more than doubled the previous year, but of course that was COVID affected. But its second half performance was really disappointing. It did, however, announce a higher than expected dividend.
So there was some good news.
Well, yes, the bank is definitely cashed up thanks to asset sales and the economic rebound, and it will buy back $3.5 billion worth of shares. All things equal, that should trigger a jump in the share price, but obviously it didn't. It dropped 7%. Westpac has been the underperformer of the 4 major banks, while Commonwealth Bank, National Australia Bank and ANZ are all up around 50% over the past year. Westpac has risen by less than 40%. Now, that's not bad, keep that in mind, but it doesn't look very good relative to its peers.
Okay, so Westpac aside, how did markets perform yesterday?
Well, it was a pretty good day after Friday's big sell-off. The S&P ASX 200 rose 0.6% to close at 7,371 points, with telcos, technology and consumer discretionary companies leading the way. Only the financial sub-index, thanks to Westpac, went backwards. Among the large caps, WiseTech Global rose 5.5%. Xero was up more than 4%. REA Group and Fortescue Metals both jumped close to 3%. And Telstra was up 2.6%. BHP and National Australia Bank both ended the day lower, as did Newcrest Mining and Afterpay. Michael, there were a couple of IPOs yesterday. Underwear group Step One Clothing hit the bourse and closed up 80%. Pretty good effort.
Wow.
And Judo Bank jumped almost 7% on its debut, valuing the group at $2.3 billion. That's one of the biggest IPOs of the year. A couple of other interesting facts here, Michael. Coal futures have tumbled as Beijing steps in to reduce prices. And in the case of thermal coal, are half the record levels of 2 weeks ago. That is a big, big fall. And the Aussie dollar is trading around 75 US cents.
Okay, and what happened in overseas markets overnight?
Wall Street was mixed as earnings season continues. More than 80% of companies that have reported so far have beat estimates. That's pretty good. Investors are waiting to see what the US Fed does on monetary policy when it meets later in the week. European markets were higher, with bourses in Germany, France, Italy and the United Kingdom all trading near multi-year or record highs. And Michael, a cautionary tale about the latest cryptocurrency sensation, Squid, which is a meme coin based on Netflix hit Squid Game. Its value jumped 230,000% over the past week to $2,862. Then overnight it fell 100% to be worth just half a cent. It's illogical, but it happened.
We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, plenty of things to talk about this morning. We got the CoreLogic house price figures yesterday. Is the market still booming?
Sort of. In places, maybe not yours and mine. Look, across capital cities, prices rose another 1.4% last month. If you include regional Australia, prices were up 1.5% last month and 22% over the past year. Now, that's the fastest pace in about 30 years. Among the capital cities, Hobart was a runaway winner with prices up 28%. Sydney and Canberra both recorded 25% rises over the last year. Next was Brisbane at 22%, Adelaide at 20%, Darwin at 19%, and Melbourne at 16%. Perth, ironically the one city probably least affected by COVID, was a laggard with prices rising 13%.
Overall, they're pretty impressive numbers, but I suppose what everybody wants to know is what's the trend? Are prices going to keep rising?
Without doubt, the pace of monthly increases has slowed. In fact, the peak was back in March. There are a couple of exceptions. Brisbane and Adelaide, which had underperformed, are now catching up and their price rises are still rising, so to speak. Interest rates are still very low. Government handouts are still happening, and there's a relatively low level of listings in the market at the moment. All that combined is supporting prices, even if affordability is falling. But it's fair to say the best is over in growth terms. When interest rates start rising and new rules around lending kick in, it's probable that growth in prices might take a breather for a couple of quarters or even a couple of years. When will that happen? Best guess, probably in the second half of next year.
Okay. And what's the latest COVID news?
Well, international flights commenced yesterday. We spoke about that, as did regional travel in New South Wales, and also the border between Victoria and New South Wales was opened. There's no quarantine in New South Wales or Victoria for double jab people. Those two states have full vaccination rates of 88% in New South Wales and 80% in Victoria. That's pretty good. The national rate is 77%. Victoria announced 1,471 cases yesterday and 4 deaths. New South Wales said it had recorded 135 new cases and 4 deaths. There were 5 cases in the ACT. And Queensland is pushing to increase its vaccination rate. And yesterday, 4,000 health workers in the state were stood down on full pay for refusing to get a COVID jab. The state has among the lowest vax rates at 64%, which is certainly a concern, Michael, in the run-up to the school holidays.
It certainly is. 4,000 health workers. That's extraordinary.
I don't know how they keep the health system running, to be honest, if that many people are stood down.
No idea. That's quite bizarre. All right, moving on, and plenty of economists, Sean, are making noise about the Reserve Bank potentially altering monetary policy at today's board meeting.
Yes, from the major banks to wealth managers and investment banks, analysts expect the central bank will drop its effort to control the yield curve today. And some even think it should stop its rhetoric about the next rise in rates not being until 2024. The bank's modus operandi is to signal change first before jumping in and doing anything, and that's what's most likely to happen today. As much will be about what it doesn't say, kind of what words they change and what words they don't change, as what the Reserve Bank actually says.
Yeah, and we'll have all the latest on that this afternoon in the afternoon market report, and we'll get into it in a bit more detail tomorrow morning in an interview as well. Former New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian was in front of ICAC yesterday, Sean. She stuck to her story that she trusted her former lover, Daryl Maguire.
She did, and said her radar didn't go off after her then boyfriend gave evidence at the New South Wales anti-corruption watchdog in 2018. Ms Berejiklian maintained that she trusted Mr Maguire and disagreed that she had lied to her staff about the relationship. She also said she didn't feel she had anything to report to ICAC. Now remember, the Commission is investigating whether Ms Berejiklian breached the public trust by failing to declare her secret relationship with Mr Maguire. And that's the critical point. Should she have told people she was in a relationship with him when handing out funding to his seat of Wagga Wagga? She says no. Pretty much everyone else says yes.
Now, Sean, all eyes are on Europe at the moment for the COP26 climate conference, but there's a bit of a sideshow happening. And I want to ask you a question. Is it fair to say that Australia-French relations are at all-time lows?
Perhaps, though I must say, Michael, I don't know my French-Australia history very well. It's all over French President Emmanuel Macron's comments to Australian media yesterday morning that, quote, he didn't think he knew, end quote, that Prime Minister Scott Morrison lied to him. Mr Macron also indicated he was unsure whether he could trust Mr Morrison. Now, you can imagine yesterday the Labor opposition was all over it, criticising the Prime Minister, while Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce, in typical style, said Australia didn't deface the Eiffel Tower or anything like that. Treasurer Josh Frydenberg said Mr Macron had made an incredible choice of language. I think that's fair to say. And yesterday afternoon, the Foreign Minister Maurice Payne held talks with the French ambassador about the incident. Overnight, Mr Morrison hit back, saying he'd personally told the French leader about the possibility of the subs deal being dumped. The Prime Minister conceded he didn't mention the US and UK alliance to Mr Macron, saying it was too confidential. Clearly, Michael, things aren't good.
That is the last thing that Scott Morrison needs in the lead up to an election. A world leader saying that he can't be trusted. The opposition is going to have an absolute field day with this.
And Macron is a very experienced politician. I'm sure he knew what he was saying. Also, about 2 months ago, when the Quad relationship between the US, Japan, India and Australia was in play, Morrison got such a boost from being a global statesperson. This just undermines all that.
It certainly does. All right, on to something a little bit lighter. Sean, I need to know, have you backed anything for the Melbourne Cup?
Of course I have, Michael. Of course I have. But did you know, from last Friday until the end of next weekend is the biggest 10 days in thoroughbred racing for the year, with major meetings across the country. Obviously, the highlight is today's Melbourne Cup. Now, thoroughbred racing is one sector that's done really well during COVID, and Australia is a major global player. Now, here's a few stats to chew on as you try and pick a winner. Prize money in Australia is up 82% in the past decade. Australia has 72 races a year worth $1 million or more. Now, that's twice as many as 6 years ago. Across all of Europe, they have just 18, and in the US, it's 49. And finally, according to the Thoroughbred Breeders Association, international buyers spent almost $79 million in yearlings and breeding stock last financial year, and that was up from $71 million, even though no one could actually turn up.
Sean, I know what you're trying to do here. You're trying to bury me in stats and avoid the question, what is your tip?
Well, there's a hot favourite called Incentivize, and the best of the overseas horses seem to be Spanish Mission, but I've studied the form hard, and I'll be going for Tralee Rose, because my daughter's name is Rose.
Okay, Sean, what's making headlines in today's news media?
The Financial Review is reporting that mining and energy companies fear that a wave of resignations over Western Australia's mandatory vaccination laws could exacerbate labour shortages that have left some miners reporting staff turnover rates close to 50%. And Bloomberg is reporting that India has set a net zero target of 2070 at the United Nations Climate Change Summit. Brazil, another large emitter, has set out a roadmap to reduce emissions, and the European Union called on nations worldwide to speed up the race to net zero emissions, step up climate finance, accelerate innovation, and agree robust rules on a global climate market.
Running through some of the other stories around today, after stockpiling points during lockdowns, Qantas frequent flyers have gone on a splurge, spending 4 billion points on more than 175,000 airline seats in under 2 weeks. International destinations LA, London, Fiji and Honolulu were most in demand. Flights up and down the East Coast were also very popular, as you can imagine.
Have you bought any?
I have not. Now I feel like I might have missed out.
I'm exactly the same. Seven West Media will acquire Prime Media for $122 million, meaning Seven West will now reach 90% of the population. Previously, Prime's major shareholders, Bruce Gordon and Anthony Catalano, had prevented a merger, but yesterday Seven said that major shareholders, who made up 44% of the stock, had already indicated their support. Seven West Media's share price ended 13% higher yesterday, but Prime's was up 72%.
Wow. And Brookfield has won the battle for AusNet services after the latter's board and major shareholders agreed to back the bid, subject to no better offer emerging. APA Group has also had access to AusNet's books and is under pressure to either concede defeat or make another offer. Now, Sean, what's the key overseas news this morning?
Well, New Zealand set a new record for daily COVID cases yesterday, 162, and the large majority were in Auckland. New Zealand now has around 75% of the population fully vaccinated, but the numbers are rising. President Joe Biden, fresh from doing a deal to reduce tariffs between the United States and the European Union, said the two jurisdictions were working on ways to curb imports of dirty steel from China. You can imagine how much Beijing liked that. The two have agreed to work jointly on a global arrangement to support sustainable steel and aluminium to reduce overcapacity and encourage greener production. Now, China produces about 56% of global steel, and much of it is using Australian iron ore. So this deal could hurt us. And finally, China's latest crackdown is on, Michael, guess what?
Go on, tell me after last week. I have no idea what this one is.
Binge eating. So as you mentioned last week, it was cauliflower, spinach and broccoli. This week, Beijing has released an action plan that tells diners not to order more than they need and encourages consumers to report restaurants for wasting food. This is all according to Bloomberg. Catering services have been told to remind customers to order the right amount of food and to provide the option of smaller servings. So there you go.
I wonder if we should now have a China's crackdown of the week segment.
It's very serious over there because they have to feed so many people, literally. Price inflation, and particularly around food and vegetables specifically, is really high. And it does sound a little crazy from our point of view that this stuff goes on, but it may make a difference.
Yeah, and I suppose actually people just ordering what they need probably does make a bit of sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, all around.
Yeah. All right, up next is the Daily Interview, and today you're speaking to Ron Gauci, the boss of the Australian Information Industry Association.
Yeah, Ron and I have a really broad discussion about the role of technology across the economy in different sectors and the need for better skills. It's nice to actually have a bit of a big picture look at technology and what we need from it.
Yeah, it's a good one. That's up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael. Good luck today. Do you have a tip?
No, I basically will go with whatever our resident economist, Stephen Koukoulas, tips because I followed his tip last year and it's the first time I've backed the winner. So I was going to be backing whatever he suggested this time and he's backing the favourite. And you can't do that, can you?
Incentivise. You can't. Didn't he tweet something yesterday to the contrary?
He did. I think he's also looking at Pondus to be written by Rachel King. So maybe I'll get on board that one.
We'll let you know in the afternoon edition.
Yeah, we certainly will. It's Tuesday, the 2nd of November, 2021. Make sure you're following the podcast. Join us online on LinkedIn, Twitter and Facebook and sign up for our free daily newsletter at fearandgreed.com.au. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.